"You're just dead weight," one of the squad leaders snapped, yanking the rope out of her hands as the evac chopper descended. She didn't argue, just backed away from the team eyes, scanning the smoke-covered ridge. An hour later, when the rescue crew found her dragging a wounded body alone across the mud, they didn't speak because they had just seen Wu. She pulled out of the fire and suddenly no one called her weak again. If you believe strength isn't loud, type here and below. The extraction zone was absolute chaos. Voices shouting over rotor noise. Thick smoke billowing from training. Charges helicopter rotor wash slamming dirt and debris into every exposed face and piece of equipment. Specialist Julia Merritt knelt beside the supply crate, her hands trembling from accumulated adrenaline and smoke inhalation that burned her throat raw. Her 8-person team had just completed an intensive combat training exercise in the rugged highlands of Washington state. Despite being classified as a drill, the terrain challenges and psychological pressure felt complementary. The entire squad had barely managed to reach their designated landing zone on schedule. Julia had consistently lagged behind the group, her combat boots waterlogged from creek crossings, her left wrist throbbing from a sprain sustained during rappelling practice. As she reached toward the cargo net to assist with equipment loading, Staff Sergeant David Riker wheeled around and confronted her with obvious irritation. "Get out of the way, Merritt. You're just dead weight slowing down this entire operation." Everyone within 30 feet heard his public humiliation clearly over the helicopter noise. Corporal Simmons deliberately looked away to avoid eye contact. Private Lee continued strapping gear down without acknowledging the confrontation. No squad member defended her or challenged Riker's harshment. Julia didn't respond verbally or show emotional reaction. She stepped back quietly from the loading area, but her attention remained focused in the smoke-covered ridge behind their position, where one reconnaissance unit still hadn't reported successful return. Echo 3, their forward observation pair. "Let's get this bird off the ground immediately," Riker shouted to the helicopter crew. But Julia kept studying the distant tree line with growing concern. Something felt fundamentally wrong about their extraction timeline. The training exercise was officially concluded, but one critical element remained unresolved. Echo 3 hadn't returned to base or reported their position. She jogged to the edge of the landing zone, activating her radio equipment. "Echo 3. This is Specialist Merritt. Do you copy transmission?" "Only static," responded through her headset. She attempted contact again with increased urgency. "Echo 3 respond immediately. Your extraction window is closing rapidly." "Let it go, Merritt," Riker barked across the landing zone. "They probably radioed from Ridge for checkpoint. You focus on getting your dead weight onto that helicopter so we don't delay departure schedules." That degrading term again. Dead weight. Julia clenched her jaw with suppressed anger, then made a decision that would change everything. She ran not toward the helicopter for extraction, away from it, toward the ridge where Echo 3 had last reported their position. Merritt Riker shouted, "Get back here immediately." She ignored his command and disappeared into the smoke-filled forest, moving as fast as her injured ankle would permit. The rest of the squad watched her departure with mixture of confusion and concern, but none followed her unauthorized pursuit of Miss Ingersoll. Riker made his choice. Complete the extraction without her. Load up. "We're not waiting for Somi Anuho, can't follow basic orders." The helicopter lifted off with 7 personnel instead of 8, leaving Julia alone in hostile training terrain with no communication support, no backup assistance, and no official authorization for solo rescue operations. But she understood something the others had missed. Echo 3's radio oscillance wasn't procedural, it was emergency. Sergeant Noah Kane, Echo 3 senior operator, was a decorated combat veteran and legendary figure through a 3rd Battalion. He didn't miss check-in times or ignore communication protocols. If Kane wasn't responding, something had gone seriously wrong. Julia pushed through dense underbrush and steep terrain, following mapped coordinates and instinct toward Echo 3's last known position, driven by conviction that her squad had abandoned someone who needed immediate assistance. The woman tackled dead weight was about to prove her true value in the most decisive way possible. True strength reveals itself not in moments of celebration, but in actions taken after everyone tells you that you're not capable or valuable enough to matter. She didn't wait for authorization or backup support. She didn't request permission from common structure. She simply moved with determined purpose. Beyond the extraction zone, the terrain became increasingly treacherous and blackened from controlled explosive charges used during training exercises. The acrid smell of burned pine needles and accumulated sweat from exhausted soldiers clung to everything like a suffocating blanket. Her lungs burned from smoke inhalation and physical exertion. Her injured ankle twisted painfully twice during steep climbs, but maintained forward progress toward Echo 3's last known grid coordinates. The arduous approach required 43 minutes of solo navigation through hostile terrain without map assistance or communication support. And what she discovered Upanarival froze her with horror. Sergeant Noah Kane, Echo 3, Senior Reconnaissance Cessable, and Battalion Legend, lying motionless on his back, both legs crushed beneath heavy debris from a training accident, bleeding profusely from multiple head wounds, barely maintaining consciousness. His communication equipment was completely shattered beyond repair. His primary weapon bent and unusable from impact damage. His designated spotter had been evacuated earlier during planet extraction and separated from Kane during chaotic retreat procedures. Kane whispered when he recognized her approach. "Thought you were extracted with the others." "They left on schedule," she replied while assessing his injuries. "I didn't." "Your trained medical personnel?" "No, just the dead weight they didn't want to carry." Kane managed a weak chuckle, coughed blood, then lost consciousness completely. Julia didn't waste precious time on hesitation or self-doubt. She immediately began emergency field treatment using basic first aid training, splining what injuries she could stabilize, carefully cuting damaged webbing around his crushed legs, and improvising transport equipment from available materials. She dragged him onto a broken door frame that would serve as makeshift transport sold for evacuation across raw terrain. For the next hour and 17 minutes, she single-handedly pulled his dead weight through broken landscape's tree roots, lingering smoke, and increasingly dangerous windstorm conditions. She slipped and fell twice during descent, nearly losing Kane down a steep ridge that would have been fatal. Her hands bled extensively from rope friction and constant gripping. But she never called for assistance or radioed for backup support because Norskew team was coming. No one else knew their location or circumstances. The woman, dismissed as dead weight, was now carrying the actual dead weight of an unconscious combat veteran across miles of hostile terrain, motivated purely by conviction that every soldier deserves rescue regardless of personal cost. Her injured ankle gave out completely during the final approach, forcing her to crawl the last 200 meters while dragging Kane behind her on the improvised sled. Only when she glimpsed the faint reflection of helicopter rotor blades through dense smoke did she allow herself to stop moving. She collapsed at the edge of the secondary landing zone, barely able to summon enough voice strength to call for medical assistance. "Medic," she managed to rasp through damaged throat. "Wounded soldier needs immediate evacuation." Her unauthorized rescue mission had succeeded against impossible odds, but the real test would be surviving the consequence of disobeying direct orders and abandoning her assigned squad. The helicopter crew rushed toward her position, initially confused about why a single soldier was requesting emergency medical evacuation in terrain that's hold have been cleared hours earlier. Then they saw who she had dragged out of forest. If you've ever had to prove your worth when everyone dismissed your capabilities, type I kept moving below. The medical personnel rushed forward, first followed immediately by Sergeant Anthel, the senior rescue coordinator who was responsible for accounting for all training personnel during extraction operations. "Who the hell authorized?" He began with obvious irritation. Then he saw the unconscious man secured to the improvised transport sled. "Dear God, that's Sergeant Kane." The entire rescue crew stopped their standard procedures and turned toward the evacuation site, Several removed their helmets in stunned disbelief at what they were witnessing. Staff Sergeant Riker, who had returned with the extraction helicopter to retrieve forgotten equipment, stood speechless as recognition dawned. That's actually Sergeant Kane, the decorated combat veteran you left behind in hostile territory, someone muttered with obvious accusation. Julia remained sitting on muddy ground, knees bent, hands trembling uncontrollably from exhaustion and adrenaline crash after her solo rescue operation. She didn't attempt to speak or justify her unauthorized actions. One of the senior medics conducting emergency assessment announced if she hadn't extracted him when she did, he would have bled out completely before nightfall. Probably had 2 hours maximum survival time remaining. Sergeant Kane was immediately prepared for medical helicopter evacuation. His vital signs were stabilized but critical. His injuries required immediate surgical intervention. The first words he managed to speak before losing consciousness again were heard clearly by every present. "She came back for me." Julia didn't participate in the mandatory after-action debriefing session. She was confined to the medical aid tent, having extensive arrow burns treated and her severely sprained ankle properly splinted. But word of her unauthorized rescue mission spread throughout the entire training facility within hours. Anyway, the woman they had publicly dismissed as deadweight had successfully saved the highest value team leader on the field through solo extraction under combat conditions. Staff Sergeant Riker approached her medical tent several hours later, his previous arrogancy completely absent from his demeanor and tone. "Specialist Merritt, you shouldn't have attempted solo rescue operations without backup support or official authorization." She looked directly at him with steady gaze. "You didn't attempt rescue operations at all." That brief exchange ended their conversation permanently. The following morning, her name was officially added to the wall in the training center facility under the formal heading Field Combination, Sala Combat. Extraction under hostile conditions. Sergeant Kane's detailed medical report was forwarded to higher command levels, including specific recommendation that Specialist Julia Merritt receive formal commendation for life-saving actions in immediate transfer to lead medical evacuation unit for future combat deployments. Her unauthorized rescue had demonstrated competence, physical endurance, and moral courage that exceeded the performance of more experienced airmen who had followed standard protocols. The investigation into training safety procedures revealed the TECH-03's communication failure had resulted from equipment malfunction, operator error, validating Julia's instinct that something was fundamentally wrong with their extraction timeline. Staff Sergeant Riker received formal reprimand for failing to confirm accountability of all-assigned personnel before authorizing strict departure, abandoning a wounded soldier in hostile territory. But more importantly, every person how witnessed Julia's rescue operation understood they had completely misjudged her capabilities and character. The rocket that Riker had yanked from her hands at the extraction zone, she had kept throughout her rescue mission, using it to secure Kane to the transport sled. After cleaning the blood from its fibers, she hung it inside her locker door with a handwritten notation. "Ika read him. You just ran away." The woman, dismissed as dead weight, had proven capable of carrying actual dead weight across impossible terrain when moral courage demanded action that others wouldn't attempt. Her rescue will be remembered as a defining moment when individual character transcended prejudice. 6 weeks later, Sergeant Noah Kane returned to active duty, walking with assistance, but Alavito spontaneous standing ovation from the entire battalion during morning formation and roll call. His survival and recovery represented successful validation of combat training procedures and emergency medical protocols that had prepared personnel for real-world crisis situations. But when he specified about Specialist Merritt's current assignment, someone pointed toward the distant training range. "She's back out there conducting solo training exercises. Doesn't socialize much." Since the incident, Kane walked across the base facility to find her. She was alone at the far edge of the obstacle course, methodically carrying a medical stretcher loaded with sandbags, practicing evacuation procedures under simulated fire conditions. Kane didn't interrupt her training routine or announce his presence. He stood at formal parade rest until she completed her exercise repetition and noticed Heist's observation. She paused her training and acknowledged his approach. "Sergeant, you're cleared for active duty because of your actions during unauthorized dressic operations." She looked down uncomfortably, clearly embarrassed by recognition. "Just did what I thought any competent soldier would do in similar circumstances." "That's exactly what makes your actions exceptional," Kane replied with obvious respect. Then he stepped forward deliberately and rendered a formal military salute. Sharp, precise. No superior officer ordered him to salute. No regulation required the gesture. He simply chose to honor her actions through military tradition. Later, other personnel from the training field began joining them. No verbal communication or coordination, just quiet formation of respect. Heads bowed in acknowledgement because Avarian now understood what she had accomplished when no one was observing or supporting her efforts. The same Ropathat Staff Sergeant Riker had pulled from her hands during extraction. She had preserved it carefully, cleaned the blood and mud from its fibers, hung it prominently on the inside of her locker door with a handwritten message. "Icarete him, you just abandoned him." 3 months later, Specialist Julia Merritt received official promotion to Sergeant in assignment as lead instructor for combat medical evacuation training, teaching other soldiers their skill techniques she had developed during her solo mission. Her unauthorized rescue operation became a mandatory case study material for leadership training programs demonstrating how individual moral courage can transcend institutional fear and prejudice. Staff Sergeant Tricker requested transfer to different unit rather than serve under someone he had publicly humiliated and abandoned, but Julia's focus remained on preparing future soldiers for situations where lives depend on individual character than group consensus or official authorization. Sometimes the person dismissed as weakest proves capable of carrying the heaviest burden when circumstance demands authentic strength rather than perceived authority. Her rescue had a defined battalion understanding of what dead weight actually meant. Not the soldier who struggles, but the soldier who abandons others when they struggle. Because real strength isn't measured by who can carry the most weight. It's measured by who refuses to abandon the weight that others won't carry. You've either had to prove you were worth more than they said type. I carried it below. Subscribe to Iron Heart Stories for moments where silence becomes strength and respect is finally earned.